everybody, and welcome back to A Fresh Perspective, where we prefer truth over narrative and principles over politics with yours truly, Jeff Charles. And today, we're going to talk about the election. You know, that little thing that happened like a week or two ago when uh, now President elect Donald Trump defeated Vice President Kamala Harris. It's a crazy, crazy story. Not too surprising, but we'll get into that in just a second. But before we get into all of that, here's what I need you to do. I need you to like this and I need you to share this. And if you haven't already subscribed, do that right now. Hit that subscribe button. That way you'll be notified whenever I upload a new episode. Also, check out my Substack. It's called Chasing Liberty. You can access that at libertychasers.com. Become a subscriber to my Substack. Support my work. I appreciate it all. Now, without further ado, let's go ahead and get into this. I'm going to be talking about Trump. You know, in another segment, I'll be talking about Kamala Harris and some other things that happened after the election and some things that we can possibly expect going forward. So here's the thing. Let's just set the stage. You know, when it comes to Trump and Kamala Harris, this wasn't just about him versus her. A lot of this was about the people versus the establishment. Now, Kamala Harris definitely represents the Democratic establishment, and some would argue that now Trump does too, since he was president before, but he is still seen as an outsider coming in to shake things up. Now, here's the thing. What I'm going to go over is why Trump won. There were a plethora of reasons, right? There was a lot going into this. And there were a lot of things that he did right, a lot of things that his campaign did right in order to make his case to the American people. Now, before the election even got rolling, though, Democrats were pulling out all of the stops to make sure that their candidate won. You might remember this. We're going to take a little trip down memory lane. See, first, they dusted off a barely used clause from the 14th Amendment. Remember this? Now, this clause was aimed at banning anyone involved in a rebellion, quote unquote, or an insurrection from holding office. And obviously, they used the riot at the Capitol building on January 6th to try to get Trump disqualified from the ballot, hoping that they could sidestep democracy, right? They always talk about democracy, yet they try to have a candidate removed without letting the people decide. The Supreme Court shut that down, right? You might remember they were like, yeah, nice try, but that ain't going to work. That clause was intended for former members of the Confederacy originally when it was originally added to the 14th Amendment. And they tried to use it to make sure that Trump couldn't win. They did it in several states, Colorado, Maine, and a bunch of others. It didn't work, but that already kind of sets the stage for not only why Trump won, but also why Democrats lost, if that makes sense, right? So you had that 14th Amendment challenge. That didn't work, but then they used the government against him. After this, then came the federal charges for the mishandling of classified documents. You had the hush money case in Manhattan. You had the civil case from New York Attorney General Letitia James. You have the ongoing efforts in Fulton County, Georgia, to prosecute Trump and a bunch of his co-defendants for trying to overturn the outcome of the 2020 election. Now, Democrats were hoping that these cases would turn voters away from Trump. I'm not sure that they actually expected to be able to put him in jail, although that would have been more icing on the cake for them. But they went full throttle with this, if you remember. Just as the polls started to go in his favor, some of these cases were obviously designed to try to get people to say, oh, well, I don't want to vote for a convicted felon. Remember, they kept throwing that word around all the time. They still do. Convicted felon. Here's the problem. It didn't work. Voters didn't buy it. There was poll after poll after poll showing that most American voters, including ones who agreed with the prosecutions, knew that this was about politics and not about a pursuit for justice. It was very clear that each of these Democrats who were heading up these prosecutions just wanted to influence the outcome of the election, which kind of makes it a little silly in the minds of voters. It's like, okay, maybe he committed a crime, maybe he didn't, but it's obvious what you guys are doing here, right? That's why it didn't work. That's why Trump still beat Kamala Harris, because nobody actually believed that this was about justice. It was about politics. And the fact that, you know, at least with the federal case, they're starting to back off of that now that he won, that shows that this was about making sure Kamala Harris won. Here's another reason why Trump won. Harris was a bad candidate, and I'm going to get to her more a little bit later, in a different segment. But she just was a horrible candidate. I mean, she wasn't inspiring, and even with a $1 billion campaign budget, she couldn't connect with the voters her party claims to champion. And I'm talking about Black voters and Hispanic voters, even women. Yeah, she won with women, but Trump won a higher percentage of women voters than he was expected to. Also, she refused to engage with platforms that reach young male voters. She did horribly among men. She refused to go on Joe Rogan's podcast. She really refused to really court men. Her campaign was really tailored towards women. On the other hand, Trump did the opposite. He jumped on every single opportunity to meet voters where they were. He appeared on Joe Rogan. He appeared on other podcasts. He even showed that he can appeal to the common man by getting a job at McDonald's, which was a hilarious stunt. And it was designed to troll Kamala Harris because she claims she worked at McDonald's when she was in college, and people doubt that she actually did. I don't know whether she did or didn't. I'm not going to comment on that. Here's the thing. He trolled her, but the thing is, the brilliance of that stunt was that it wasn't really about Kamala Harris. Trump looked good serving people through the drive-through, making fries, doing all that stuff. It was a great way for him to appeal to the regular person, something that Democrats used to excel at, by the way. But in this case, Trump he made it work. He had on that his shirt and tie with an apron over it. It looked ridiculous. It was hilarious, and you could tell that he was having tons of fun doing that. I talked about that in my last episode. Stuff like that counts. It helps, and that's not the only thing that he did to appeal to everyday people, especially men. But there was also the policy agenda. That's one of the reasons Trump won as well. He had a very clear policy agenda that he could articulate, whereas Kamala Harris was talking more in vague terms, not a whole lot of specific policies. She had some, but not a whole lot. But here's the thing. Trump focused on what Americans care about. And it wasn't just a list of vague promises. He didn't hone in on abortion and other issues. He talked about the economy because that is the first thing people are concerned about right now. When people are going to the grocery stores and wondering how they're going to put food on the table, when they're filling up their gas tanks and paying tons of money for it, that's what they're struggling with. That's what's on their mind. Abortion isn't on their minds at that moment. He promised to extend the 2017 tax cuts, which are set to expire next year, and he promised to add on new cuts that will reduce taxes on things like overtime income, tips, Social Security payments, and in essence, he has promised to let people keep more of what they earn. Now, he may or may not do that when he's actually elected, although he should, because Republicans have control of the White House and both chambers of Congress. But we'll see. He also discussed immigration, which people see as a huge issue, especially with the border crisis that really cropped up shortly after President Biden took office. The Biden administration largely ignored this issue. And yet you see a lot of migrants in border towns in major cities like New York City, Chicago, and they are basically burdening the system. The money that is going to house them could be going to help American citizens. Yet you don't see Biden or Harris or anybody else really doing much about it. Trump already has a track record on immigration, doesn't he? Right? Now, you may not agree with all of his immigration policies, but he was actually at least taking action to address the issue and to cut down on the chaos that is going on at our southern border as you're listening to this. He also talked about crime. He tapped into the frustration that a lot of people feel about rising violent crime rates in major cities. Democrats responded to this by lying about it, saying that it was going down. And then we had that report come out probably about a month ago now, showing that the FBI data that Democrats were relying on that initially showed like a 2% drop, they revised it, quietly. They quietly edited that data to show that it actually increased by 4.5%. Here's the thing. Nobody believed that in the first place. Nobody believed what Democrats were saying about crime in the first place because they can see what's happening around them. They can see what's happening in their communities. They can hear what their family and friends are telling them about, break-ins, violent crimes, carjackings, all of that stuff. A lot of Americans are worried about safety in their neighborhood, and Trump spoke to that without lying about it. He told them that he had a plan for it. Now, to be fair, there isn't a whole hell of a lot that a president can do about this, but that doesn't mean that there's nothing that Trump can do about it. And that's what people care about. They want somebody who's going to address this issue rather than trying to downplay it. Also, there's the issue of foreign policy. Trump committed to keeping the United States out of unnecessary wars, and Americans have been weary of endless foreign entanglements. Trump promised that he wouldn't get involved in conflicts that didn't directly serve U.S. interests. That's important. People don't want their sons and daughters sent out to war for no good reason. Now, some of his cabinet appointments, or at least one of them, Marco Rubio, might give some cause for concern about the possibility of us getting involved in foreign wars, but there is still hope. I mean, as far as funding Ukraine, funding the war in Israel, and getting troops involved in places where they shouldn't be, Trump has assuaged a lot of concerns about that. We'll see how that goes. He also vowed to dismantle the Department of Education, which is a controversial proposal. Not for me, because I want that to happen, but a lot of people are upset about that. But again, people do recognize that there is a huge problem with education in America. Kamala Harris didn't have a plan for that. Trump seems to have at least something of a plan. We'll see how it works. But again, this is about who was actually putting forth solutions and who wasn't. In this race, it was clear. Kamala Harris didn't have much of a plan for a lot of these issues. And when it comes to the economy, the best thing that she had was basically price fixing to stop grocery stores from quote unquote price gouging. And even Democrats railed at that. Even Democrats were criticizing that plan. So she didn't really have much substance there because Kamala Harris just doesn't have a whole lot of substance. Here's the next reason why Trump won. So he did what a lot of Republican presidential candidates have failed to do. He made a serious, genuine, authentic appeal to non-white voters. He made a serious, sustained effort to reach Black and Hispanic voters who typically vote mostly for Democrats. And here's the thing, he wasn't just pandering like you saw from Democrats. I mean, Kamala Harris had Megan Thee Stallion on stage. She had Cardi B pandering to Black people. She had Oprah. She had all the usual Black celebrity faces that are intended to convince Black people to vote for Democrats. But that was pretty much it. I mean, she did have that plan for Black men that she came out with when it became clear that she was losing Black men. Trump was doing this from the beginning. And again, he wasn't just pandering, he was actually discussing the issues that these communities care about and offering something different from the status quo. He talked about policies that would help to uplift their economic situations, create jobs, boost security in their neighborhoods. Remember, crime is an issue. And stuff that really resonates regardless of one's ethnicity or race or background or what have you. And it worked. It worked. So for years, Republicans have struggled to make inroads with minority voters. I shouldn't use the word struggled because struggle implies that they were actually trying in the first place. And we all know they weren't. They weren't. Trump is the first Republican presidential candidate in a long time to actually make an effort, an authentic one, not just a fake one, just to say that he tried to reach Black voters. He actually wanted to do it. According to CNN's exit polls, about 20% of Black men voted for Trump this time around, which is unheard of. This is a historic figure for any Republican candidate. A Fox News exit poll survey showed that he gained around 25% of the Black male vote. And overall, he got about 15% of the total Black vote, which is the highest that any Republican presidential candidate has received since Gerald Ford. The numbers don't lie, y'all. They don't. Minority voters are fed up with being taken for granted by the Democratic Party. You can only do that for so long, right? I mean, Democrats rewarded the loyalty coming from Black Americans with nothing. So at a certain point, people are going to get fed up, especially among younger generations. On the other hand, Trump didn't assume that these voters owed him anything like the Democrats did. The messaging was horrible coming from Democrats. Oh, you got to vote for Kamala Harris because she's a Black woman and yada, 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 yada. And here's the thing, they obviously saw this coming, but again, their messaging was horrible. They spent so much time trying to shame folks like myself and Hispanic voters not to vote for Trump. They rolled out Barack Obama to tell Black men that if they don't vote for Kamala Harris, it's because they're sexist. Yeah, that was a winning strategy. Usually they're better at this stuff, but I don't know what's going on with the Democratic Party today. It's absolutely ridiculous. And here's the thing, his Trump's success with minority voters was one of the most talked about aspects of this election. Not only did it show that these communities are not monolithic, but it also shows that they're willing to support a candidate who they believe respects them enough to come to them with a serious plan, or they're willing to vote against a party that they know will do nothing for them. Because keep in mind, a lot of these people weren't necessarily voting for Trump, they were voting against Democrats. And that's true the other way around, too. A lot of people who voted for Kamala Harris were holding their nose. They just didn't want Trump in office. That's the situation that we are in America today. So here's the last factor. This would be the MAGA base. Trump's supporters stayed loyal no matter how many attacks came his way. Even after they tried to impeach him twice for BS and they had all these BS prosecutions against them, these folks never wavered because they know that Trump was being unfairly targeted. He was being targeted for his politics, not for his alleged crimes. And a lot of people personally identify with Trump. Now, I'm not one of them. I don't do that with politicians. But to be fair, a lot of people do that. They did it with Trump. They did it with Kamala Harris. They did it with Biden. They did it with Obama. It's just part of the political environment here in the United States. So, what is the lesson here? So, for Democrats, they thought that they could shame and litigate and prosecute and try to disqualify Trump from winning. But instead, those actions actually helped him win. See, people aren't looking for a saint. They're looking for somebody who listens and who actually has solutions. The lesson for Republicans is one that I don't believe that they'll take. I mean, if the Republican Party wants to stay relevant, they would have to follow Trump's example, especially when it comes to reaching out to non white voters. And they don't want to do that. Now, again, I'm not talking about regular, everyday Republican voters. I'm talking about the party itself. I'm talking about the party leadership. I'm talking about the party apparatus. I'm talking about, yes, I'm talking about conservative media. They don't want any of this to happen. There are plenty of reasons for this. I've talked about it at length for years, so I won't go into all that now. But the fact of the matter is, if they actually wanted to continue winning, they would follow Trump's example. He laid out the game plan for them. We'll see if they actually do it. But there are lessons here for Republicans. It's also going to depend on how they govern. The Republican Party has a mandate, at least for these 2 years, where they have control of both chambers of Congress and the White House. But this is how Trump won, and this is why he won. And this is going to be instructive for, I think, for years to come in American politics. So I'll leave that there. There will be plenty more to talk about later, especially as Trump gets into office and Democrats' heads explode one by one by one. Kind of like that movie, the King's Gentleman, where that guy was popping people's heads. All right, I'm digressing. Anyway, so anyway, I'll leave it there. Thank you for listening. Thanks for watching. And until next time, stay free, stay principled, and most importantly, stay ungovernable.